Want me to play the slideshow? All right, so we are going to talk about copyright today. So I'm going to start at the very beginning for you folks. What is copyright law? So copyright is a federal law enacted in 1976, but implemented in 1978 that controls original works of authorship. So it includes the all kinds of different things having to do with creativity. We'll get into the details in a second, but you have to remember that any author or creator owns the copyright. The author may transfer ownership of the copyright. Let's say you're publishing a chapter in a book and the publisher might own the copyright instead of you, that kind of thing. The owner has exclusive right to how the work is controlled, distributed, and displayed. So we'll get into the details of that in a second. So what I'm talking about with copyright law today has to do with the copyright law enacted as of 1978, which protection lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years. And there's details having to do with other types of works where it says Title 17 and duration of copyright. Those are circulars put out by the Copyright Office that'll explain for copyright for works published prior to 1976, as well as the ins and outs of the specifics of copyright law. So how is copyright created? So copyright arises as soon as the work is put in a tangible medium. As soon as you take that picture, as soon as you record the video, as soon as it is written, it is automatically protected by copyright. You do not necessarily have to register with the Copyright Office. So remember that is like if you're coming into somebody's published art display and they're doing a work that they're videoing, as soon as that thing is videoed, that is a copyrighted work. You cannot reuse it. So what is protected by copyright? And you see the list here: literary works, dramatic works, photographs, music, artistic works, architecture, as well as software and internet and web pages. So there are other laws having to do with, music sharing, music videos, that kind of thing. However, copyright covers all of it. So what are the rights associated with copyright? So when you're saying copyright, that is the right to copy, right? Right? Okay, so under the copyright law, only copyright owners have the exclusive right to allow others to do the following: reproduce, adapt, distribute, perform, or display their works. If you want to use somebody else's publication, you need to ask for copyright. So what happens when you buy a book, a piece of music, a magazine, a video? Well, you're not really buying the work itself, you're buying a copy. You have a limited right to use that for your own personal use, but you have no other rights to that copyrighted work. So for instance, if you buy a copy of a book and you want to use a chapter in your class, you do not have the right to make additional copies of the purchased copy unless you fall under the rights of fair use, which we'll get into later. But if you're there and you want to use that chapter and give out 15 chapters to your friends, you're actually violating copyright. So how can you use copyright materials in your class? You can use copyright materials if you and your students have legally purchased copies of that work. You have obtained permission from the copyright owner to make copies, or you don't need permission because an exemption applies, and we'll be going over those permissions. Okay. When do you not need permission to use materials for your class? In face-to-face activities. Generally, if you're using a copy in a face-to-face class, you're okay. Materials that are not copyrightable, we will cover that as well. Materials in the public domain. Open education resources, which are actually covered by copyright, but also have an added Creative Commons license. We'll go into the ins and outs in a second. And what the government and the federal government calls fair use. All right, so exemption 1, face-to-face teaching. So copyright law provides a face-to-face teaching exemption. It allows faculty to just display or distribute copies in face-to-face teaching activities. These are generally in-class activities, so this is the physical. So you can show a movie, you can project images for an art class. You can have students perform a play in class, or you can display or perform any other type of copyrighted works, including the entire work. If you want them to read an entire play that is copyrighted, they can read it in class. So as long as there is no direct or indirect admission charge, it must be part of the instructional activities and directly related to the teaching content of your course. So the exemption number 2 is the non-copyrighted materials. So what are non-copyrighted materials? Ideas. So spontaneous thoughts, brainstorming sessions. Those are not copyrighted. Facts. So I can tell you the Earth is a third planet from the sun, or the moon revolves around the Earth, or the sky is blue. Those are facts. Discovery methods, like the scientific method, statistical analysis, the Pythagorean theorem. Concepts. Actually, recipes are not copyrighted. Recipe books are, just so you know. Et cetera, et cetera. And methodologies. So like the research methods are not protected by copyright law. Governmental works are open to the public and are not copyrightable. So anything published by the US government is not copyrightable. So exemption number 3 are works in the public domain. Every year you hear in the news about certain things coming into the public domain. This year was a big deal about Steamboat Willie, Walt Disney, Mickey Mouse, that kind of thing is now in the public domain. Those are items that have expired copyright. Those are open for you to use in class. Governmental works are in the public domain. Works that an author has dedicated for the public domain, and when an author publishes a work, they can actually say, you know what, anybody can use it. And works that do not meet the requirements. So it is an expression of facts, research, and ideas that are copyrighted, not the ideas, facts, and research itself. Exemption 4 is the OER and Creative Commons licensing. Okay, so we talk about OER a lot and how we have this to be used. So open education resources are licensed under Creative Commons licenses. So you have your copyright, which covers the document, but authors can put a Creative Commons license on it to put restrictions on how their items can be used. So they could say, yes, you can redistribute this, or yes, you can copy this and use this in your class, but then you can't manipulate it. And you can see those licenses in there. So OER is not the same as what they call free or open access materials. Those are under different, different restrictions. And that requires a whole nother conversation. I talked about free and open access forever. But with with a Creative Commons license, it'll exist alongside the copyrighted law and uses its framework to provide creators with a system for legally sharing their work while retaining some control. Okay, and the licenses look like this. So these are Creative Commons licenses. As you see, it becomes from most free to most restricted. If you want to know about Creative Commons licenses and OER, I suggest you talk to Miss Nora Reckley, who is the expert in that. I have had multiple trainings on Creative Commons. However, she probably knows more than me. All right, and exemption number 5 is what we call fair use. So the fair use doctrine of the U.S. Copyright Act provides for limited use of copyrighted materials for education and research purposes without obtaining the permission of the copyright owner. So if you use copyrighted works while you're teaching, are you always covered by fair use? No. You have to make sure that you have fair and reasonable use of the item. And if you need to use the entire item, you need to ask for permission to use the item. So fair use does not give you the unlimited right to copy and distribute material at will. So when you're looking at fair use, you have to look at the character of the use. Are you using it in your class sessions? What is the nature of the work to be cited? Factual works actually are easier for fair use than what they call imaginative works, so artworks and things like that. What is the amount and substantiality of the portion to be used. Now, there are many rules and regulations that libraries use for what is the substantiality of a work that you can use. You know, is it 30 seconds of a piece of music? Is it 15% of a book or a chapter? There is actually no written law that says the percentage of an item you can use. What it's more along the lines of is how much of the work are you using that doesn't reflect the entire work. So you can use a chapter of a book, or you can use a portion of a poem, but not the whole poem. And it's the foggy part here is whether or not the originator of the work would have a problem with using as much as you're using, not necessarily whether or not it's a certain percentage. And I don't know how else to explain it other than that. So be careful when you start using large portions of a book, or you know, remanipulating art, or sharing an entire piece of music or a movie. Because what they're going to look at is things, will it negatively affect the value of the copyrighted material? Are you taking away essentially money out of somebody's pocket by using that entire work? So how do you use copyrighted materials? A single copy is fine. Multiple copies are okay, provided that the number of copies do not exceed more than 1 copy per student. All right, and you want to make sure that the work includes a notice of copyright. Put a copyright stamp on it, watermark it, put a notice at the top, you know, on your shell to make sure that people understand that they have to use this under copyright restrictions. Don't use multiple copy and distribution of materials as a substitute for the purchase of books. And do not copy and distribute consumable materials such as workbooks, standardized tests, test booklets, etc. If in doubt, always ask permission. So you always make a good faith effort to obtain the author's permission to transmit or make multiple copies of copyrighted materials, to use the materials in class for more than 1 semester, and use any materials that fall outside of fair use guidelines. So whether you need permission or not, always provide attribution to the original author and display a copyright notice on the things you're using in your course, just to cover yourself. All right. For things in the digital domain, meaning working in your CMS, they are covered by the Technology Education and Copyright Harmonization Act of 2002. Now, that act was brought about generally after, if any of you remember this far back, the Napster music sharing mess that happened where people were freely sharing digital materials with each other and causing all kinds of copyright issues. The federal government decided there had to be some sort of restrictions on that. However, they needed to have some freedoms for teachers to be able to use digital materials in their courses. So they created this act. So you still have to follow the fair use guidelines, but you also have these Teach Act guidelines on top of it. So given that you follow all the requirements, you should be fine. And you won't need to ask for permission from the copyright owner. So if you are displaying information in your CMS, you must have the materials relate to a regular part of your instructional activity. They must be under the direction of the instructor and directly relate to material of your course. For materials available for download, so you give the student access to a short story and you want them to download it and read it. I mean, they could download it and read it, right? So you must be, the content must be accessible only to the students who are enrolled in the course, and they must be available only for the duration of the class session. So you can't just keep the data up there forever. To the extent as technologically possible, you must protect it from further distribution, which they call a downstream control. And usually that's putting a password on a PDF file so that the students only have access to it. Another thing that you should do is display a copyright notice in your course. So if you are having these materials in your course, you want to put something here. And I just, I generated this from ChatGPT, but the campus doesn't have an official copyright notice on that I could find anywhere. But this one actually is very similar to many others I've seen in other schools. It just says that we are, giving you copyrighted materials and you should not redistribute it. It just kind of covers the course as a whole. So in order to comply with the Teach Act, you want to notify students that the works are subject to copyright protection and supervise digital performance display. If we're playing a movie, don't just, make it downloadable. Okay. Limit access to the works that they have available and use only excerpts of any of those materials. Don't upload your entire textbook. Don't upload whole course packs or other resources that are generally purchased by students. Don't use pirated works. And one thing that has happened recently here is don't link to sites that do not have the permission to reproduce the work. So let's say you are using I'll use short story again. We're using a short story and you found a copy of that short story on a short story page. Well, Bob has no permission anywhere on that page does he have displayed that he can actually reproduce that work, but he did it. And you can't find it anyplace else, so you link to Bob. It's called complicit copyright infringement. You know that person doesn't have permission to reproduce that work, yet you're linking to it. That actually could get you into some sort of trouble. So make sure that you have permission to link to the stuff that you're linking to. And don't play an entire motion picture or perform an entire play during class that will be transmitted. So the rule of thumb is don't distribute copyrighted material that's used as a substitute for the purchase of that material by students. All right. Again, use a small amount of the work in relation to the whole. Link to materials available in library databases. You will find many, many times that the library has what you're looking for electronically, or can obtain it for you if you're looking for a copy of a book or a chapter or a poem. We're working with the English department right now to find a poetry database to help cover some of the works they're using in their literature courses. We can find information for you or help you find it. Make them available for limited time. Put a copyright notice on all pages. And if images are to be disseminated to a broader audience than the students, get copyright permissions. So let's say you are downloading images to reuse for students to make digital collages that we will then put on display for an art project. You need to get permission from the copyright owner. So, and then it says faculty can alter copyrighted works, of course. All right. In multimedia projects, can you use images and whatever you find on the internet in your PowerPoint presentations? Yes, you actually can. It has to be used for face-to-face or online instruction. Assign or direct students to self-study the material, use limited portions of material, and provide copyright. All right, let's talk about infringement. What happens when you infringe on somebody's copyright? Well, I'll give you an example. My previous institution, we had electronic reserves. We had someone give us a personal copy. What we thought was a personal copy of a chapter of a book to put on reserve. Well, it wasn't. It was something he had gotten digitally from somebody else. So he made a digital copy of something. He gave it to us. We uploaded it. And then we get a letter from the copyright owner saying, you have infringed upon my copyright. And they sent us a bill for $3,000. Thankfully, we talked him out of the $3,000 bill and we just removed the information. But that's the kind of thing you can get yourself into. So you don't want to infringe on somebody's copyright. You don't want somebody to do that to you, right? So obtain the owner's permission to use the copyrighted material. If you don't obtain permission, it needs to fall under those exemptions. All right. So you want to make sure that you're educated educational use of copyrighted material stays within the boundaries of fair use and the Teach Act. So use copyrighted materials only for teaching, research, etc. And use only enough to accomplish your instructional objectives. Don't make sure you give the author attribution and take precautions to limit access to materials by students in the course for just that semester. Now, I provided you, and this has been a very thing, I provided you a list of readings. The first one is the copyright law. The other one is section 110, which has to do with fair use. The Copyright Clearance Center Marketplace is a place where you can search for copyrights and copyright owners. So let's say you want to use a book for your course and you want to contact the author to ask them if you can use the materials. You can actually search the marketplace. They'll tell you who the copyright owner is and give you contact information. Yes, Justin.
We have a question from Professor Jackson that asks, does placing the content in a Canvas course satisfy that last criterion?
Which criterion? Back it up.
Probably for the use it for teaching, etc. Password protection, excuse me, password protection.
It can, yes. Because you're restricting it just to the students of the course and we have single sign-on for the coursework, you probably would be okay to use it like that. If you're nervous about that, you can always password protect the PDF file and then give the students access to that. It's up to you. It depends. Because the fact that sometimes, every once in a while, outside people come and look at our CMS, it's about the downstream use of the product. So if you put a password on it, the student can download it because you have the password, but generally they forget passwords and then they try to distribute it to somebody else and it can't be distributed. Generally, they're not going to re-share, science notes, that kind of thing. But they might. So it's up to you, I think, for that kind of thing. But I'm pretty sure the CMS should be good to cover that kind of thing. All right, so the Copyright Clearance Center is where you're going to look for copyrights. There's another search engine through the copyright.gov website. I find their search engine to be particularly terrible, but you can search for copyrights there, and they can particularly search for the pre-76 copyrights to see if they're still active, which is really kind of handy. And remember, copyrights can be re-upped, so they can actually re-register their copyright before death and push it out another 70 years. So make sure that you check. There's a really good discussion from the Library of Congress about the Teach Act and distance learning that you might find interesting. And they have a bunch of things on copyright and third-party content and instructional videos from the Copyright Office. And the last one is about the Creative Commons licenses. So lots and lots of reading for you. Questions? That was a lot of stuff. I'm going to upload the presentation so you can have it for your use. No one has questions. I put you all to sleep because it's not a very fun topic.
So if I am looking for a PDF document, or if I'm looking for a piece of research and I place that into my course and upload, let's say I just find it on like Google Scholar, and then I upload that document into my course and I put the reference to the material, am I generally following fair use or am I breaking rules?
You're generally okay because especially if you're putting it just in your CMS. I think a lot of the copyright issues happen when you're freely distributing it beyond the course, as well as where you're linking it from. So let's say, like I said, we had that example of, you're linking to so-and-so's poetry site. Well, does that person have permission? It's when you go the deep web linking. So not the first level linking to the publisher or the author, but the second and third, fourth level linking where you're not sure if those people even have the copyright. And then if you knowingly redistribute it, then you're breaking copyright. Does that make sense? I think the best thing you could do is use our library catalog first, see where the materials are, and link directly to the materials owned that have access or owned by the college. Nora has a
Thank you.
question. Nora has a question.
Oh, I was just gonna say what you just said, so never mind. But Justin, also when you use Google Scholar and you run across an article that's actually full text and the PDF is available, it's probably going to be open access anyway.
Yeah.
So check for that.
We haven't talked about open access materials.
Yeah.
Google Scholar contains a ton of open access materials. So open access means that the author has provided permission for open linking to the material. It doesn't allow you to necessarily what do they call it, manipulate it or whatever thing like that, take portions of that kind of thing. But it allows you to link directly to the entire material. So, and then there's also things that are called free. So free and open access are similar but not the same, and they have different copyright and licensing agreements. But those generally, all of those materials in Scholar should be linkable. If you see the link, you should be able to link straight through. Same thing with like ERIC, which is actually a governmental entity, and the documents housed in ERIC, because they are held there, are free and open. Mr. Jackson.
Hi, Katie.
Hi.
So if I have lecture videos that I made using textbook images, let's say from Pearson or McGraw-Hill, and I switch my course over to OER, I don't require the textbook anymore. All the stuff that's published, within Canvas is not from the textbook, but I have these lecture videos that have images that they had. Do I have to replace those images, or does the use of those images fall under fair use?
They should fall under fair use if you still have a copy of the item. Like so, if you have a physical copy of the book and you have decided to use them for your course and they're used within the course itself as pieces of the teaching, you do not need to ask for permission, but you do have to give attribution.
Okay.
Sybil.
Hey there. So in our TRIG courses, we link to a PDF that's a completed unit circle, as well as one that is blank to have students practice. And I'm recalling one of your earlier slides that mentioned 1 copy per student. Are we violating anything there? Because we print copies of that blank one to include with their test, each test.
You could be, but I think if you know who the copyright holder is and you ask for permission to reuse it and they just give it to you, a lot of times they'll just say, sure, go ahead. Then you just need to give attribution and say, thank you to author so-and-so for giving us permission to use this. And then you could just use it. Does that make sense? It's about asking for access. Say, yes, we link it, but we also make copies. And it's the copies that are the problem. But if they're okay with you doing that and using it as course materials, for instance, I think Nora told me a story of an English professor that used a book by Neil Gaiman. And he wrote a letter to Neil Gaiman and said, can I use this for my course? And the author's like, yes, that's absolutely fabulous. Please do that. And from then on, he was able to use the full text of the full book in every course and just redistribute it as he needed to. So that's why it's great to ask permission. And not necessarily, it could. So a unit circle may fall under facts, but not necessarily, because the the compilation of the information is copyrightable. Salma.
Hello. So to kind of piggyback off of that, if the form or the handout, for instance, already has the original publisher on there, would that fall under something that we would have to use, or we still have to attribute to the original creator in some way in addition to what's listed?
If it already has a copyright symbol and copyright blah, blah, blah about this author, and it should say reproduced with permission, you should be okay. So if it doesn't say that, then you just want to make sure that you just ask for permission.
Okay.
I think asking for permission is the best thing you can do. If you're worried about whether or not you might be not following copyright. So it's always better just to ask. Any other questions? The librarians can help you with the, oh, cool. The librarians can help you with asking for attribution and where to go for such things. I'm looking at the stats thing here, embeddedmath.com. It doesn't have anything here. I bet you could just send a quick email saying, is it okay to reproduce this for my course? And they would just say yes, because they're giving it out here, you know, free and easy. I'm surprised they didn't just put the note on the document itself saying you can reproduce this.
There may be something on the actual website.
Actually, I just searched for it. And it says here you can download a copy of the unit circle. It has all the angles, blah, blah, blah. And it says it's on embeddedmath.com. It says free math worksheets. And it's got the blank unit circle on there.
That's the one we copy, you know, for them to fill out on the test, though.
This
Sounds
this
like
looks
it's
like
okay.
it looks like it's okay. Yeah, they said please download these for free, so that's clearly written on their website.
Yeah. So I think you're fine with it.
Yeah.
Okay, because the blank one also has the embeddedmath.com on it, right?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so it already gives attribution back to the original.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
James
thanks,
says
Jane.
that there's a public domain unit circle on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing too, is if you're looking at materials and you're worried about whether or not you can get permission to use them, you can also work with librarians or even your dean, or you know, to look and see if there are other resources that you might be able to link to, like a Wikipedia site that might give you the same information, and you wouldn't have to ask for the attribution.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions on copyright? Yes, Sybil.
So I've always heard that I can link to just about anything in my Canvas course. I mean, I can't download it, but I can link to it. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, you know, you're free to link to whatever you want. However, like I said, it's what they call the deep linking. So first level linking directly to the publisher and they're giving out the resource for free is fine. When you start taking the copy of the copy of the copy, that's when it becomes problematic because you're not sure if those people actually have permission to reproduce the work. We find that a lot in literature areas where someone, you know, the author publishes the book and then somebody bootlegs it and PDFs it and throws it up on the internet someplace so you can read it for free. And then all of a sudden you're linking to that, and it's a knowing violation of copyright. I mean, by doing that, you're just saying, yeah, I know we're violating copyright, but that's free, so I'm just going to link to it. You just want to try not to do that because that kind of vicarious copyright thing. Yeah, you need to, it should say on their website that either you can download this for free and I own it, or it is reproduced with the permission of the author or the publisher. And those will keep you safe.
And in my case, it's typically linking to YouTube videos, you know, to explain concepts a little differently than I might.
Right.
And I vet them. I'm looking at your comment about legitimate. I always watch the entire video and decide if it's, you know, a good one or not. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming I'm okay. I'm not actually embedding the video. I just put the link to the video.
It should be fine. I think it depends on, let's say, instead of linking to a provider, like somebody who's like a math teacher doing a really cool video on how to, you know, execute certain problem, you're linking to a film, Hollywood film that was put out 2 years ago on math, and it wasn't put up there by the, you know, the entity that put it together, the studio. It was put up by somebody who downloaded a copy and then redistributed it. Those are the problem ones. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions, problems, or concerns? Okay, see, I let you go early. If you guys have any problems with copyright, Nora has a question.
Not,
Yes,
not a
ma'am.
question, just a comment. If you go to any poem on Poetry Foundation, you can see what Katie's talking about with the getting permission. Poetry Foundation gives copyright credit to the original author, and it says it's reprinted by permission of Harold Ober and Associates. I'm just going to link you to a specific poem here. And then you can see the kind of legitimacy we're looking for, right? We're looking for something that says, okay, yeah, we have permission to publish it. Therefore, you have permission to link to it.
Yes, as Beverly says, is the difference between linking to a lecture published by the institution where it is given versus linking to a copy of the video of the lecture posted by, you know, any Joe Schmo on the internet. Don't call him John Doe, call him Joe Schmo.
Joe Schmo.
Joe Schmo. Anything else that worries you? I think, you know, it's just more about I always call it if in doubt, throw it out, right? So if you're really in doubt of whether or not what you're doing is correct, it might be better to see if you can find another resource. Just because it's not something you want to get into. You don't want to get somebody writing you a letter that I heard that you were redistributing this in your class and I own it and I can't believe you did this and now you know, here's a bill. Or even worse, I'm going to sue you. Nora.
I was just talking to Karen, and one of the other issues that's coming up very soon is, especially with videos, is accessibility. So as you're working on your courses, like now, we have to have everything be accessible by 2026, I believe. Is that right,
April.
Justin? April of 26?
Yep, April
26th.
24th, 2026.
So make sure your videos that you're linking to are accessible. They have captions and stuff like that.
And if you're linking to materials in our library databases, and we have a lot of videos, we have a lot of images, we have a lot of course, books and etc. All of those are already accessible. You won't have to worry about those. So that's something to think about as you're linking out to different things.
TED Talks and Khan Academy videos are also accessible already.
And most governmental videos, I would say almost all, I think they have the same requirement we have. They should be accessible as well.
And if you guys have any questions about finding accessible videos or research or anything, please ask us. That's what we do.
That's what we do. Pick your favorite librarian.
Yep. Pick a librarian, any librarian,
librarian.
will help you.